My hometown was haunted by a shape-shifting entity. Encountering it was the worst decision of my life. Written by CIAHerpes on Reddit. Please like and subscribe. Now let's get started. As we entered the abandoned house, a sense of being watched came over me. I looked behind me, seeing only the front hallway, extending towards the door. The wallpaper, an ugly blue color, had peeled away in many spots, revealing black mold and rotting planks, and then we heard it. A growl, deep and low, coming from the kitchen. "Something's in here with us," Chuck said to me. I nodded at him, pulling my camera out of my back pocket and starting the recording. As I stared down the hallway, it seemed to lengthen until it stretched as long as a football field. Looking behind me at the cracked door we had come in through, I had found it turned into solid brick, fused with the rest of the wall. There was no way back out. My adrenaline was pumping through my body, and I saw Chuck looking nervous as well, his pupils huge, his hands trembling, his face pale. As we walked down the endless hallway, I heard the growling turn to laughter, a sickly, diseased sound that seemed to spit mucus with every breath. The ceiling had receded far above us now, disappearing into a blanket of shadows. From the kitchen, something appeared, dragging one shattered leg behind it. Splinters of bone sticking out through its decaying skin. Chuck shone the flashlight on its face, and I kept the camera pointed ahead, nearly dropping it when I saw the walking corpse was my own mother, a sick woman who had drowned my 5-year-old sister in the bathtub before driving her car into a tree at 90 miles an hour, offing herself. She had been dead for over 20 years. "Billy," she said to me, her face half gone. Maggots and flies showed in her blackened gums as she smiled wide, her milky film-covered eyes staring in my direction. "My boy, my sweet boy." Specks of dark, clotted blood flew out of her mouth as she spoke, dragging her shattered leg behind her. She left pieces of her rotten flesh on the hallway floor, snarls of broken wood and nails catching her skin and ripping it apart. The smell of a rotting body reached over to us, so thick that I could taste it. Gagging, I tried to cover my mouth and nose with my left elbow, keeping my camera trained on the thing that had killed so many. "Don't be like that, Billy," she said to me. "Come give your mother a kiss." I've heard of houses being haunted, or abandoned mental asylums, or even complexes of factories. But what about an entire street? The place where I grew up, named Jericho Hill Road, was always eerie. The amount of car accidents and natural deaths on the road was astounding. But even worse, there were even constant disappearances, murders, and suicides. The state park along much of Jericho Hill Road, called Gilead Forest, had gained a reputation, and not one the town would appreciate. More bodies had been dragged out of there in the last few years than anyone in power cared to admit. I had told all of this to Chuck, my roommate in college, and he saw an instant gold mine. "We have to get there and get this stuff on camera," he said to me last night as we sat eating in a local diner. "Can you imagine how many followers we would gain if we recorded it? If we caught actual evidence of something haunting the street and offing people?" He had a successful blog and a YouTube channel, mostly involved with exploring abandoned places, ghost towns, old factories, underground tunnels, disused subway platforms, little-known caves, and any other old spots within a few-hour drive he could find. "I don't give a crap about followers or views," I said. "This isn't some game. We had 10 people go missing in a span of just 2 years. 3 of them were kids. Some of the missing were taken from their beds in the dead of night without any sign of forced entry. The police chief covered it all up to keep the media from descending on our town like a horde of locusts. But everyone in the area knew that people were going missing. Some chalked it up to a serial killer or human trafficking ring, but none of the cases were ever solved. And most of the bodies never recovered." Chuck looked more excited than ever, his eyes shining. "I need you to go with me, bud," he said. "You're the only one I trust who knows that town, inside and out. I'll pay you $200. It probably won't take me more than a few hours. And, well, don't you want to know what really happened there? What if we could find evidence of something? Bring some closure to the families." I shrugged. "We won't be bringing closure to anyone if we're dead," I said, sipping my coffee. The waitress had arrived with our food, bringing Reubens and fries and more coffee to our booth. We stopped talking until she had left. I smiled vacantly up at her, thanking her. Between bites of pastrami, Chuck leaned close to me. "What if we could clear your mom's name?" he asked quietly. "Maybe she didn't do what they accused her of. Maybe whatever haunts that town possessed her or something. If we could gain evidence." I then slammed my hand down on the table, causing a few people to look over at me, frowning. "Don't talk about my mother," I said. "She did it. She was guilty. She murdered my sister and then committed the unalive. There is no clearing that." Chuck looked ashamed, putting his sandwich down and leaning close to me. "Look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up. I just mean, maybe that thing there drives people insane somehow. Makes them do stuff they would never consider doing in a normal state of mind. But we have to go and look. Who else cares enough to try and figure out what happened in your hometown? The police sound like a joke. The mayor and selectmen sound like they have covered up the deaths for decades. And it isn't like we can call the FBI and tell them there's a demonic entity haunting Jericho Hill Road." I sighed. I knew he was right. I often wondered what happened to the families of the missing children, whether the parents were torn apart by the losses, whether they still had hope of ever seeing their kids again. "All right," I said, leaning back into my booth seat, "but only for a few hours. After that, come hell or high water, I'm leaving you there. Also, it's your turn to pay for dinner." "Your sister is here, Billy," the thing pretending to be my mother said, a swollen purple tongue flicking out of her mouth and running along the remnants of her lips, which looked like they had been mostly eaten away by insects or fallen off over time. It gave her a permanent grinning look, like a skull. As she spoke, nasty black phlegm and clotted blood dripped down her chin. The smell of rotting bodies grew stronger. She continued to taunt me. She is dead, but nothing around here stays dead for long. Wouldn't you like to see your baby sister one last time? Give her a little kiss on the forehead and draw up a nice deep bath afterwards. It's been a long time since she's seen you. She screams for you still, even in death. She asks where she is constantly, why she's stuck in blackness. She wants you to join her. Shut up, I screamed, my heart thudding so fast that I could no longer discern the individual beats that pulsed in my temple. A migraine began to start in my head. Tears began to form in my eyes. Blinking fast, I pushed them back. This was no time to cry over those who were dead. Whatever this thing was, it was dangerous, and it seemed to like to play with its food before it ate it. Chuck looked back at me. I still held the camera up. He nodded at me. Then, with a speed his large body didn't seem capable of, he pulled out the holstered pistol from his chest. Before I could say anything, he aimed the gun at the demon, shooting the entire magazine in rapid succession, causing my ears to ring. This thing in the kitchen had been too fast for him, however. In a blur, it had dropped to the floor, most of the bullets passing harmlessly overhead. One, however, ended up winging its side, blowing off a small dagger-like leg that had shot out of its ripped clothes. Its face melted off in a waxy, decaying rivulets. Its flesh fell off, shedding like the skin of a snake, squirming maggots falling off and laying on the dirty, dusty floor as it transformed. I saw the white bone of the skull underneath, as chunks of maggot-infested flesh fell to the floor in heaps. Its clothes, a yellow sundress my mother often wore, and I had been wearing when she died, ripped apart as something new emerged from that dead body. I slipped the camera in my back pocket, and I saw Chuck reholster the now useless pistol. He had no extra magazines on him. Part of me wondered if he ever thought he would need the gun at all, that perhaps he had thought we were just going snipe hunting, searching for non-existent creatures to make a spooky video for his followers. But he now knew better. But it might be too late for either of us now. The transformed monster looked in many ways like a writhing centipede, if centipedes were 10 feet long and a foot wide. Its countless sharp legs clicked on the wooden floor of the abandoned house. Its skin reflected the dull light as waves of motion rippled through its chitinous obsidian-like covering. But the eyes were the most disturbing part. They still held the filmy, milky eyes of my dead mother, the muted blue iris still showing through under the cataracts and the decay. Chuck began to back up rapidly, walking right into me and slamming his back against my shaking hands, causing me to drop the camera. "Oh God," Chuck said, looking like he was about to keel over. "I can't do spiders and centipedes. I hate centipedes." "Forget about that," I shrieked at him, snatching the camera back up from the floor. The massive centipede gained on us rapidly. "You better give me the flashlight." Without a word, he handed me the heavy metal flashlight. The centipede was now only 10 feet away, skittering at a pace that would outrun even the fastest person. It hissed at us, pushing itself up onto its back legs, towering over us. The milky eyes shone with excitement and hunger. Then, without warning, it leapt forward, going after Chris's throat. Its pincers clacked together over and over as it flew, as if it already tasted the warm blood of a victim. Without thinking, I raised the flashlight by the front, bringing it down on the centipede's right eye with all of my force. The blow knocked it down lower, throwing off its trajectory, and it landed at Chuck's feet, instead of grabbing him by the head or neck. But the blow didn't stop its clacking mandibles, seemingly excited by the prospect of fresh meat so near to it. Chuck put his hands in front of him in terror as the centipede shook its head like a dog, rapidly recovering its sense of balance, even as its right eye swelled shut, blue blood dripping onto the floor. It opened its pincers again, and with a flash, it grabbed Chuck's left hand. He screamed so loud that my ears rang. I brought the flashlight down on its head once more, aiming at the same eye I'd already injured. With a start, it pulled back, taking 2 of Chuck's fingers with it, and swallowing them in a moment. In my peripheral vision, I saw him stare with abject horror at his mutilated hand, a stream of blood running down his arm, but I had no time to focus on that. Time seemed to slow down when its one good eye stared at me, no longer shining with excitement, but furious and insane. It leapt at my throat, and I only saved myself through pure luck and instinct. Still holding the flashlight by the front, I took the solid metal and jammed it in front of me. It smashed into the pincers, and they reflectively closed around the base of it, ripping it out of my hands as it bounced into my upper torso, sending me sprawling. Within seconds, I was back on my feet, grabbing Chuck by his arm and heaving him forward. We began to sprint away, Chuck on my heels, so close I could hear his ragged, terrified breathing. The creature appeared to be slowing, its missing front leg oozing greenish-gray blood that turned blue as it streamed out of its injured body, its eye bleeding faster as half of its face swelled up. Chuck and I ran as the centipede spun, yet with all of its injuries, we were able to escape into the kitchen, though I could hear the tittering sound of its tiny clawed feet rhythmically tapping against the floor close behind us. In the kitchen, I saw a horrifying sight. Some of the missing people were here, having died in horrifying ways. One man appeared to have been burned alive, while the body of a child was nailed to the wall in a mocking parody of Christ's crucifixion. A woman hanging from the rafters had her eyes cut out, the black socket seeming to stare directly at me. I saw a window that had been smashed to pieces years ago on the far side of the kitchen. The glass was nearly all gone, except for some jagged pieces on the bottom. Panicked, and hearing the creature now only feet behind me, I jumped through it. The jump was not perfect. I ended up slicing open my belly and chest on the sharp glass on the bottom as I flew through it. The cuts felt deep and incredibly painful, but with all the adrenaline coursing through my body, I was able to ignore them for now. Turning around the back porch, I saw Chuck being pulled back into the house, the pincers now gripping him by the back of the neck. The poison from the centipede has swollen his hand to near twice its normal size, and now more dripped into his blood from the shallow slices the centipede inflicted near his spine. With terrified, pleading eyes, his face beginning to swell, he was dragging towards the endless hallway. I knew I could not go in and save him. I had no weapon now, not a pistol or even a flashlight, but I did have a camera. Taking it out, I recorded Chuck receding into the blackness, being dragged away by the eldritch abomination that had killed so many. He screamed and cried, "No, no, 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 not like this, not like this," he repeated in a hopeless, insane voice. I wanted to help him, but my survival instinct screamed at me to stay out of that house, to leave this cursed road and never come back. And yet, I knew Chuck cared about his followers and views, that he wanted to be famous. So I made him famous, recording as much of that death as I could, posting it to his YouTube channel later that night. In a way, his wish had come true. He had proven the existence of something horrible, and now the entire world would get to see it.
Hey, can I borrow your attention for a little second? You see, I'm saving up for some equipment items, like a VR headset so I can record in VR chat, or a new AT2020 mic. You can help me fund these by going to my throne in the description below. I'll leave it on the top to help you find it. If you enjoy my video, please check it out. Now, that's the end of today's video. I'll see you later.